When I first saw this headline, I thought to myself, there's no way this can be true. This has got to be fake news. But upon further digging, it appears that the Federal Reserve is indeed showing at least some level of support for a return to the gold standard. I'll explain as we explore. Gold. Through the course of time, it has indeed intrigued mankind, and it has propped up and held stable nation-states and empires throughout the course of history. That is unending and unchanging. To this very day, it is propping up nation-states. And in fact, the reality is, if it is true that the United States holds over 8,100 tons of this metal, well, that is the ultimate backdrop and safe zone, because no other nation comes close to holding the amount of gold that we do, at least according to official holding numbers. So, it shouldn't surprise us to some extent that the Federal Reserve itself would have good things to say about a gold standard. But in reality, we know what kind of people are in charge there. But there are some people at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia Research Department that hold a little different view, and they have released a white paper, and I'm going to actually put a link to this in the description below. I very rarely do that for the pieces that I share because most aren't as interested, but this is quite a read. This is the most comprehensive look at a specific portion of a gold standard from a home country to other nations. I'm going to get into this. Now, immediately after I saw this, I got an email from Gold Chick referring to another financial channel that covered this as well. But I'm going to go to it a little bit deeper here, because I think the first thing we have to realize is the disclaimer that they put in this research white paper. The Philadelphia Fed working paper represents preliminary research that is being circulated for discussion purposes. And they should have put only, because really that is what it's about. The views expressed in these papers are solely those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. Any errors or omissions are the responsibility of the authors. Philadelphia Fed working papers are free to download, and of course, who knows what other kind of working papers that they have out there that may express different points of view. And likely there have been some on a central bank digital currency for quite some time, and we know that is where the Fed is headed overall. But the fact that this is being done in Philadelphia by two individuals here, one from the University of Pennsylvania and another one from the research department at the Philadelphia Fed, I think is quite telling. Now, this piece was published in February, and it was authored about a month earlier. It's price level determination under the gold standard. And that is something that is quite intriguing that they go through here. I'm going to read a little bit of the abstract here, because I think this really does give us an idea about what it means to have gold as the ultimate safe haven and to stabilize prices, which is, by the way, one of the directives that the Federal Reserve has. It is essentially to keep the price, the dollar stable, and to maintain employment numbers. You know, they want to try to maintain the economy and good economic health, but their biggest directive is to stabilize the dollar, the Federal Reserve note. Now, how do they do that? We know that under the current system, they have a target of the decline of the dollar's value over the course of time. That is at a rate of 2% per year. So that's inflation, folks. Believe it or not, that is the normal inflation that we can all accept. And in fact, many don't even call that inflation. They call it inflation when it goes above that, or it's a little bit out of their control. And right now, it is sitting at 3.2%. So it is out of their control to some level and to some degree, in spite of what they have been doing. Now, they would make the case that it would be a whole lot worse if they weren't involved and didn't do the things that they're doing. Quantitative tightening, they refer to it as, which essentially means raising interest rates, and now they're at a hold, on a wait and see, a holding pattern for interest rates, And many of us are contemplating when will they next lower rates because of what's going on and the spending that Congress has now mandated, an extra $1.2 trillion in spending that's coming down the pike. We're adding $1 trillion every 100 days. It's about 3+ months of time before we see another $1 trillion being added to the national debt. You know, that what we've been doing in the past is unsustainable, but how much of it is sustainable if they just keep on doing this? Something's got to give somewhere at some time. We just don't know when that will be. So I think this paper, this white paper, is quite intriguing in the timing of its release. They present a micro-founded monetary model of a small open economy to examine the behavior of money, prices, and the output under the gold standard. In particular, we formally analyze Hume's celebrated price specie flow mechanism. Their framework incorporates the influence of international trade on the money supply in the home country through gold flows. In the short run, a positive correlation exists between the quantity of money and the price level. Additionally, they demonstrate that money is non-neutral during the transition to the steady state, which has implications for welfare. While the gold standard exposes the home country to short-term fluctuations in money, prices, and output caused by external shocks, it ensures long-term price stability. That is what they have been found in their research. And you know what? There's a lot of formulas in this white paper, and I think you're going to be blown away by the amount of math involved in this. But in reality, it's a no-brainer. Of course that's the case, because gold has a limited supply. You can't just digitize it and print it. You can't create it out of thin air. No, gold has to be mined. There's a lot of work that goes into producing just 1 ounce of this metal that you see before you on your screen. So while the gold standard exposes this, this short-term fluctuations, the fact that it is long-term, steady state levels, and this is what they see there. External shocks. It ensures long-term price stability. They discuss the importance of policy coordination for achieving efficiency under the gold standard and consider the role of fiat money in this environment. They develop a version of the model with 2 large economies. And I looked through some of that math, and it is, your eyes glaze over. I encourage you all to look at this. Again, I'll post it down in the description below. The classical gold standard was abandoned following the Great Depression. Discussions of viable monetary systems based on precious metals have persisted, and scholars have dedicated significant attention to studying their properties. In Friedman and Schwartz' 1963 documentation of the U.S. experience under the gold standard after the country resumed specie payments in 1879, and Gallerati in 1995 analyzed the institutions associated with the gold standard during its classical period from 1818 to 1914. The gold standard continued to be viewed by many scholars as an important benchmark for analyzing the international monetary system. There have been few attempts to model a commodity money system in a modern dynamic general equilibrium framework. In particular, the authors are unaware of any theoretical analysis of specie flow and their relation to the money supply, prices, and output in modern models where money is essential in the sense, according to Wallace. Now, to address the gap, this paper represents a random matching model of small open economy to examine the dynamics of prices and output under the gold standard. They go to it very much in depth, for sure. But one thing that we'll say about this is probably one of the most interesting things and intriguing things about this. A durable commodity, gold, serves as a medium of exchange for bilateral transactions among agents. Consequently, the home country's total money supply hinges on the international trade pattern. Imports lead to gold outflows, and exports result in gold inflows. The price level in the home country is determined by the reciprocal of the value of goods in terms of gold. And, gold being the one variant, which means we really cannot weaponize the dollar. It's got to be maintained by the value of the gold. It takes really the power away from the state and puts it into the commodity, in this case, the monetary metal, which, by the way, as I have noted many times on this channel, was delegated by the Central Bank of Central Bankers as a Tier 1 asset, upgraded from a Tier 3 asset, putting it equal to and on par with the U.S. dollar and foreign exchange reserves. That's so important, because I think that, in a sense, is what the precipice of this document is about. And so it's quite fascinating indeed. And this is a really an interesting read. And again, it's not saying that they're going to move to a gold standard. It's just saying this is what this is some models that we've done through bilateral trade under this situation. But also, it doesn't go too much into the actual domestic situation, but obviously it would have a domestic impact as well too, stabilizing the dollar, essentially minimizing inflation and deflationary environments. Money is non-neutral under the gold standard. This is a very important part of this paper. When the quantity of money in the home country starts below the steady state level, the home country temporarily accumulates gold along the transition path. Hence, the money supply rises over time. The output in the bilateral matches involve domestic traders monotonically increases in the transition path to the steady state as the price level in the home country rises. Money is non-neutral because new money can only enter the home country if exporters bring in more gold than importers take out. That's right. That's the only way you increase. You can't print it. Conversely, when the quantity of money starts to above the steady state level, the home country loses gold temporarily to the rest of the world, and the money supply declines. The output in the bilateral matches involving domestic traders monotonically decreases in the transition path. So essentially, this is a way that inflation and deflation can occur under a gold standard, but to be very, very minute in terms of that level. Because, inflows and outflows, but the overall level of gold around the world is something very different. Of course, the more private individuals have gold in the home country or in the other countries that there is trade with, I think that just emboldens the people. That's right, it emboldens the people, because gold is the same whether it's in a 400-ounce contract-sized bar held in Fort Knox, or a 100-gram bar held in private hands, and a couple of 1-ounce coins. A really interesting piece, yes, indeed. And it's amazing. And I want to say again, too, how my subscribers, it's ironic how I'll find pieces, and then literally minutes or an hour later, I get an email from somebody finding the same thing. Pretty interesting. Great minds think alike, although many of my viewers' minds are much greater than mine. But if you found this video insightful, educational, and informative, I hope you would consider pressing that like button and subscribing to the channel if you find value in the content that I provide here. So I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.